Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is the case of Sarah Cafferkey. She was actually murdered by a man that should have never been a free man in the first place, and obviously, as you can imagine, that causes a lot of anger in this case and a lot of just why. That's all. I don't know what else to say on it. Why? And rightly so, you know. You'll see as we get into it the reasoning behind it all. This case was actually suggested by Brittany, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have. And of course, if you do have any more, please do let me know. Sarah Louise Cafferkey was born on the 20th of June in 1990 to parents Adrian Cafferkey and Noelle Dixon. That was in Australia, in Victoria. Sarah actually grew up in Marsh, and unfortunately when she reached the age of... They had all moved to Queensland, and so her father stayed in Queensland and they both sort of moved back to Marsh, and then they would travel between the two to see each other. You know, Sarah would go to Queensland, her father, Adrian, would come down to Marsh, things like that, to go and see each other. Although that did get less frequent the older she got, because she wanted to, you know, she started becoming a teenager, she wanted to spend more time with her friends, things like that. She attended Coimadi Primary School and Marsh Grammar, and unfortunately she did begin to develop some serious health issues. She had suffered from asthma all her life, but it was never diagnosed, and I think it was diagnosed when she was 15, and when that point was reached, she was quite bad with it. She ended up being hospitalized on numerous occasions, things like that, and it got to the point where she couldn't actually finish school because of it. She couldn't go into school because of these health issues, so she did end up being homeschooled after that. Despite that, you know, she had dreams that she wanted to work in the justice system. She wanted to become a lawyer. Sarah was described as this beautiful, funny, caring young woman who was loved by anyone that met her. She was a massive lover of animals. In fact, at the time of this case happening, she had just purchased her own dog, who she called Sprocket, who she absolutely adored. Like teenagers do, Sarah did, at the age of 16, end up experimenting with alcohol, but she also got into the harder stuff as well, like a lot of people do, unfortunately. Don't ever do drugs, kids. And it was something that she would struggle with her for the rest of her life. It's just so sad, because looking into it, she'd have like she'd get on drugs, she would go into rehab to try and get off the drugs, then she'd have a relapse and she'd end up back in. Do you know what I mean? She really, really struggled, and she really wanted to get better and to get off the drugs. It was just really, really hard for her, and she was trying, she really was. In September of 2011, she met a boyfriend who was called Christopher Stewart. They began dating, and their relationship wasn't that great either. They were very off and on, break up, get back together, break up, get back together, you know what I mean? It was just very volatile. It didn't really seem like Chris was a great guy. Like, I read at one point, they broke up. It was about a year after they began dating, and then Chris ends up sending one of his mates to go and stalk her at work or something to try and intimidate her. So you can just see it's not the best of relationships, to be honest. She tried to not let it bother her. She tried to carry on. At the time, she was working in a bar as a gaming attendant and like a bartender at this hotel in Melton. Now, in September, Sarah was introduced to a man called Stephen Hunter through a network of friends. Now, what she didn't actually know, I believe this man was actually Chris's friend who he had sent to stalk her that time, that I mentioned not long ago. And they began spending some more and more time together, and they actually became friends themselves within the sort of up and coming months that they spent together. Stephen was 46, so he was a lot older than Sarah, who at the time was 22. Now, apparently Sarah actually knew that Stephen had a criminal record, but I honestly, wholeheartedly do not believe she knew the entire extent of it, because surely if she did, she would have gone nowhere near him. I mean, we'll get into that a little bit later on. And not only that, he lied to others about his convictions too, so what's to say that he's not lying to her about it? Things were not going great for Sarah. Although she tried to kick her drug habit, obviously it's very difficult. She went into detox and then she relapsed again. And unfortunately, because of all of that, in November of 2012, on the 8th, I believe, she ended up having this meeting with a boss who basically said that he couldn't employ her at this moment in time as her life was, because it was a bit of a mess. Unfortunately, she was in a bit of a mess at the moment. And so basically he said that the job would still be there for you. We still want to employ you, but just you need to get your life back on track first. So that is what was said. That is what was going to happen, which I think is, it's nice that they would leave it open for her. They obviously cared for her, because a lot of, you know, jobs would say you've become too unreliable, which is what they said about her. And, you know, you're no longer wanted here. You no longer have a job here. But they were going to leave it open for her. So they were going to wait until she got her life back on track, and then the job was still there for her. Obviously, this gutted Sarah, but I believe she was booked in to do another, like, detox section, because she really did want to get rid of the drugs out of her life. She honestly did. Now we're on the 10th of November in 2012, which obviously is 2 days later after Sarah was told about a job. And she's caught on CCTV at this Food Works local supermarket store buying alcohol. I believe the plan was they were going to all go out and have drinks with friends and things like that. And apparently she was going to meet her new friend, which was Stephen. Noelle was actually concerned about Stephen. She'd not known him for that long. I don't know, she was just worried about him. To the point where she actually texted him, and Sarah replied with, "If anything happens, Ali knows where he is and where he lives." And then that was one of the last text messages that she actually received off Sarah, because after that she just didn't reply again. And then she would try and contact Sarah. She didn't hear anything off her for the next 2 days. Like, anything at all. I don't know whether that was normal for Sarah, whether she would just go out partying with friends and her mum wouldn't hear off her, things like that, especially if she was obviously doing the hard stuff. Sometimes you'll go off and do that and not contact anyone. Do you know what I mean? I don't know whether that was normal. I don't know why it was 2 days before she was reported missing, but it wasn't until the 12th when she was reported missing. On the 14th, police issued a public plea to anybody that knows any information about where Sarah may have been. But at that point, everyone was already out looking for her. You know, the police, community, everyone that was spare was out there looking for her. But unfortunately, they didn't find anything. A few days later, I believe it was on the 15th, they came across her silver 2001 Astra sedan. It was outside of this house, but that didn't give them any clues as to where she was or anything either. I believe it was just outside of a random house. It didn't have any sort of reference to anything. She wasn't in the house, so. Then on the 6th day of her going missing, it was finally began to unravel as to what actually happened to her. Police went and cordoned off this house that was 15 miles away from Bacchus Marsh after receiving a tip. So they go to this house, and straight away they know something's wrong because they can smell the horrible stench of decay. They enter the house. Well, you don't even need to enter the house because the smell was actually coming from this green wheelie bin outside. They open the lid and it's like filled with concrete. They know something wrong has gone on here, obviously. They end up requesting like a CT scan of the bin to figure out what was in it, although they probably already knew. I mean, you could hazard a guess. The smell and then the concrete in a bin, I mean, it's pretty random, right? They also found blood, I believe, on the floor, on the step ladders around the bin. And whilst this was happening, the police were also cordoning off another house, which was actually back in Bacchus Marsh. And this house, they brought the UV lights in and they found blood like every aspect of the kitchen. It was everywhere. So you've got one house in Bacchus Marsh that's full of blood. You've got this house that's 15 miles away that has a bin full of concrete and smells of decay. So, it's horrific what actually happened. They finally get this CT scan and their worst fears are confirmed when they find that there is a human body inside of that concrete, and they do discover that that body is Sarah Cafferkey's body. Police actually made the connection between Stephen and Sarah from Ali, and as well as from her Facebook. So they go on her Facebook and there's all these comments from this Stephen guy about, I don't know what he's commenting, I can't remember what it said, but you know, he's all over there. And when they look into him, they are immediately worried because he has a criminal record, and a bad one at that. He has done one of the most severe offences that there is in this world, and that is murder. Stephen James Hunter was actually convicted and found guilty for murder in 1986 when he was 21 years old. He met and had a crush on a young woman called Jacqueline Matthews, She was a colleague of his. He, of course, made advances to her because he became obsessed with her. She didn't want anything to do with him, said no, which he wouldn't take for an answer, and then he decided to murder her. He tried to make it look like a car accident as well. He basically burnt her body, put it in the car, crashed the car, then set the car on fire. I don't know. He probably burnt the body after when he set the car on fire. Yeah, that was probably it. But he just made it look like a car crash, as if the car had crashed, combusted, and, you know, tried to get rid of all the evidence that way. It didn't work though. They still caught him. So he got 16 years for that, and a minimum of 13 years before the chance of parole, which in my eyes is nowhere near enough at all for murdering a young woman. But there you go. So he's murdered someone. He's got all these years in jail. 2 years later, he escapes jail. Yeah, that was 1990. Then he gets sent back to jail. He serves his 13 years. And then miraculously, he is paroled for good behaviour in 2000. Honestly, this case just does my head in because it's insane how many chances this man got and how many times he failed those chances and still got more. It's just infuriating. He would frequently break parole, be sent back in for sometimes like 2 months. Then he would get paroled again for good behaviour. And he'd just be back on the streets again. Honestly, it's just dumb. Really dumb. In October of 2004, he was taken to prison again for trafficking, stalking, kidnap, and causing injury to another human being. Yeah. Oh, but get this. He served 6 years for that. Then in 2011, he's released again for good behaviour. The model citizen Stephen Hunter was released again. He was walking the streets again because he was such a good person. Seriously. This time he did manage to stay out of trouble for a little bit of time. He completed his parole on the 30th of October 2012, and that was just 11 days before Sarah vanished. And the reason that the police actually cordoned off the 2 properties was because Stephen was in both of them. He was actually in between moving at the time. So he lived in Bacchusmarsh, which is where they found all the blood all over in the kitchen. Then, coincidentally, he moved to where they found her body in the bin. Yeah. So, seemingly, he committed half of the crime there at the first house and then half the crime at the second house, I guess. That's just why they're related. That's where that comes in. On the 17th of November, postmortem showed that Sarah had been stabbed multiple times with a knife, and she had also been hit over the head with a hammer. Basically, what happened that day is she went down to his house. Now, I've read a couple of things. So, I believe they had an argument that possibly there was some fighting involved. There's mention of something, him calling somebody that he knew, and then her thinking it was about her, and it wasn't, and then they argued, something like that. But I've also seen that apparently he tried to sort of advance on her sexually, and she rebuffed him, and then he didn't like the rejection. So I don't know which is the actual case. Either way, if they fought or whatever, Stephen was much, much larger than Sarah, and he very quickly was able to overpower her. He then apparently snapped and murdered her brutally. So he has killed Sarah, and then he leaves her body laying in his kitchen, and then out he goes. The next day, he's sending Sarah messages to her phone. At 10:07, he states, "Hey bandit, just come to. Sue hungover, what you up to?" Bearing in mind, he's killed her at this point. He's just doing this to basically back up that he didn't do it, I guess. He sends her a couple throughout the day, with the last one about 1:30 saying, "Call me, need my keys," or something along those lines. And again, police just figured that he was sending those to cover up that he had killed her, essentially, that he didn't know she was dead because he was still messaging her. Oldest trick in the book, eh? He then finally came back. He wrapped Sarah's body in a bag and he put her in the boot of his car. I believe he asked a friend for his help. This friend refused, and then he decided that he'd have to go it alone. He went to the store, he bought this 20-litre container, some hydrochloric acid, some lime, and 3 bags of rapid set concrete, along with a roll of black plastic. He then obviously took her back to the house, he put her body in the bin, and he put the concrete in it. The really sad thing about this was, because of what he'd done to Sarah's body, her mum couldn't even see her like Noelle. I watched an interview with her, and they didn't even allow, she said she wanted to see her to say goodbye, and they wouldn't even allow it because of just how, just what he'd done to her, how much of a state her body was in. encased in concrete and all that. Just, can you imagine? So she wasn't even able to say goodbye to her in that sense, which is just so heartbreaking. On the 20th of November, Stephen Hunter was finally found and he was arrested for the murder of Sarah Cafferkey. Before his trial even began, he did plead guilty to a murder, and in August of 2013, obviously was found guilty of Sarah's murder, and he got life in prison without the possibility of parole. Which finally means that Stephen will never ever get out again. I have no idea why he got out so many times in the first place after killing a woman in cold blood, and then breaking parole so many times, kidnapping or whatever the other charges were on him, and then being released again for him to kill Sarah. Honestly, it's just so infuriating, but it's too late for Sarah. But at least now, he will never get out again. He will never hurt another soul. Which, you know, that is one good thing to come of it all. But it's just, it should have happened sooner. I don't know what the justice system was thinking on this one, like, at all. He was not a model citizen. He was not a good person, and he should have not got out. He should have got a longer sentence in the first place, in my eyes, but he didn't. And then, I don't know. It's just annoying. It's just really frustrating. But there you go. Who am I guess? But yeah, that is the end of the case. If you guys have enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel for similar content. Anyway, that's all I have today on the case of Sarah Cafferkey. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, bye.